Akshay is here. Hello. Very nice. All right. So, for those of you that are just joining us and have never been on this before, this is a mini AMA or Ask Me Anything. So that is a monthly virtual interactive educational series where we're joined by subject matter experts to answer your questions. My name is Maria Pussell. I'm the executive director in Minnestar. We're the nonprofit community org that is built to nurture and engage those interested in technology through meaningful connection. And we put on a bunch of different events in the community. One of them is Mini AMA. So we are really excited to be joined today by this amazing panel as we discuss a topic that comes up a lot for founders. So when you're at that point of considering accelerators or incubators or competitions or programs that'll help take you to that next level. A lot of times you just wish you could talk to someone who has been through it. Super timely because if you are not familiar, this week, at the end of the week, there are two deadlines. One is for Minnesota Cup, one is for Impact SKU, and then Finovation Labs deadline is also coming up May 15th. So super timely. We're really excited. You will notice if you joined us last week, because we had the Zoom hacking, so things are a little bit tighter, and your chat will go directly to the panelists instead of being visible by everyone. So that's just a little bit of a change, but we're really excited to be jumping off today for this conversation. So I'm gonna let all our panelists introduce themselves, but first I'm gonna kick it off to our incredible moderator, Damola.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks a lot, Maria. Happy to see so many folks joining this chat and joining the conversation. Obviously, last week was not the ideal situation that we all wanted, but we moved past that. And we're going to have a good day today, and we're going to have a good conversation. So thanks all for joining. My name is Damola Ogundipe. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of a Twin Cities-based startup called Civic Eagle. We help organizations manage government policy and legislation across the country using a pretty innovative software as a service platform. I'm joined today by our three panelists, Tyrre, Michelle, and Shawntera. They'll introduce themselves, so I won't spend too much time trying to butcher their introductions. I'll let them take control of that. But what we're going to do today is we're going to spend the next close to an hour asking questions of our panelists about the different programs, accelerators that they went through, why they went through those, what they've learned, what they accomplished, where they were when they applied and got into those programs, and really be able to provide everybody that's attending right now with some context on and all those different pieces of information that you need to make a decision on which programs are right for you and then how to get into them. There's, like Maria mentioned, on your right on the Zoom screen, you'll see a chat area. We're gonna also field questions from the attendees from the audience. So if you have a question that you want to ask a panelist or all the panelists, just go ahead and type it into that chat area, that chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I'll see it, and if it's a question that I think is good, I'll ask the panelists. If it's a question that I think it pertains to everybody, I'll ask the panelists. No dumb questions, but there are good questions. So the good questions will make sure we bubble up to the panelists for them to answer. But I also have some questions that I'll ask them myself just to get the conversation going. So with that being said, I'm gonna pass it on to our first panelist. Michelle, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and your company?
Hi, I'm Michelle Maryns. I am the founder and CEO of We Sparkle, which is a social enterprise that helps small businesses save time and increase their revenues through our software tools. One of our first tools is a conversational AI assistant that text messages with a business's customers to schedule appointments and do other administrative and marketing tasks.
Cool, thanks, Michelle. Tyrre, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Tyrre Burks here, founder and CEO of Players Health. We've created a risk management platform for sports organizations. We help these organizations create the safest environment possible for their athletes to play sport. That could be injury management, abuse prevention, staff compliance, and their insurance. So anything that our organization needs to manage risk, we help these organizations specifically focus with amateur youth sports organizations.
Thanks a lot, Tyrre. And Shawntera?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Shawntera Hardy. Happy to be here. Appreciate everyone coming back this week. Excited to talk about accelerators in hopes that we can decelerate the ignorance and incompetence that was experienced last week. And so very excited for this conversation. I am one of the co-founders along with Damola of Civic Eagle. And my responsibilities are around strategy and operations, and I look forward to furthering the conversation.
That was very witty, Shawntera. So let's go. Let's go ahead and jump into these questions. It was good. Let's go ahead and jump into these questions. So the first question to the panelists: could each of you share what programs you've been a part of locally and nationally? How did you first hear about them? And then could you also describe where your company was in terms of maturity when you got into the program? In other words, how did you know it was the right time for your company to join that program? Let's go ahead and start off with Tyrre.
Yeah, so we went through 2 programs over the course of our life cycle of our business to date. Our first program was Accelerator, Milwaukee. That was 2015. And the second program we went through, Techstars Boulder, that was 2017. I think our company is in a dramatically different experience, different stages in both areas. At the time when I went through Accelerator, we had generated a little bit of revenue. We had a number of organizations that were using our platform, and we were still trying to figure out how we sell the platform. As I said, we had some early customers that were using the platform, but we were still trying to find how do we build a business. And injury management, concussions was kind of the big at the time. And kind of our focus for being a part of the program was really around fundraising our initial seed round of financing. Through that program, we did $1 million in our seed round. Going through Techstars, our company was in a huge pivoting direction. So I was at the time working on pivoting the company from just being this injury management platform to being more holistic around risk management and adding an insurance component. So there was a huge regulatory and kind of burden and barrier to entry that a lot of organizations have to do when it comes to creating an insurance organization. And I thought going through Techstars that we needed to level up and they could help support us through that effort. But we were trying to figure out from a branding perspective, like how do we build this organization and how do we find a business model? And Techstars helped us through that. And we did another 1.5 million going through Techstars Boulder after that.
And Tyrre, a follow-up question from Amy from our audience. How did you share what was going on with that pivot with your customers at the time? And then also your community, your funders. You mentioned that you raised $1 million round and then you pivoted while you were in Techstars. So you had some investors. How did you communicate all that was going on with the company while you were going through the accelerator?
Honestly, I think I was really just telling them a story around how I got there. Everything that we did was almost, it seems in hindsight, like it was the next inevitable step. Only I was learning through the process or figuring out what wasn't working. And so when I was going through Accelerator, I was really communicating what our current business model was or what we thought it would be. All right, we got some early traction with these customers, brought in a few $1,000s. Is that the scalable business model? Going through Techstars, we had failed to fully monetize the business model that we had going through Accelerator, but we had a new opportunity with insurance. We knew that that was an established market. We knew that insurance is being sold for sports organizations across the world, for that matter, and it's something that they already are buying. We were providing that in a more comprehensive way. Everything that we were doing from a risk services perspective was what organizations must have. So we went from selling nice to haves for organizations to only selling things that they had to have to run their organizations. You need a background check on your coaches. You have to buy insurance. You have to do safe sport or abuse prevention training. These are laws that they have to follow. So we went from selling the nice to haves in the beginning to, through this experience, focusing on exactly what we needed to really build a business that could scale.
And I think, if I could add my 2 cents, like the larger kind of picture and story as it pertains to everybody that's listening to this call or to this conversation is that, early investors, early supporters, they're supporting you, right? They're supporting the person, they're supporting the vision. They're not supporting the product that you released right then. So They're supporting the journey. So, I mean, they're going to be very open to, and they expect the company to go through to go through at least one pivot, if not more, and really figure out what does product market fit look like for the company. But early on, they're really making an investment and a commitment to you and to your team. So I wouldn't worry too much about like whether or not you're, shifting and pivoting your company, as long as you have a story and narrative and logic behind your decision making. So thanks a lot for sharing that, Tyrre. Shawntera, could you share the programs that you have been a part of locally and nationally? How did you first hear about them? And then how did you or we decide that our company was right for the program, that the timing was right?
Absolutely. And thank you for that question. For Civic Eagle, we started our company with a grand vision, really focused on how do we have an impact on democracy, and how do we do that in the public policy space. And so we started with a B2C product that for much of the beginning of that product's life, it was focused on us as a team. And that is a theme that you'll hear throughout what I say, us as a team bootstrapping and learning the startup game. And so our journey started with us building from the ground up. We then moved into the Minnesota Cup. We were successful in 2015 with winning the social division of that competition, and that really laid the foundation for the framework of the business. And so it was a really great program to get that high level understanding of kind of the business development. And a lot of the work from there was really focused on, as Tyrre said, really trying to figure out that product market fit. We did have a great product, but the product market fit from a standpoint of finding a business model that was able to monetize was not there. And so we accelerated through some individual programs as founders, such as Code 2040, and also Founders Gym. And then we moved into a couple pre-accelerator programs like the farm. And that really allowed for us to make that pivot to our B2B product that Damola mentioned, that is our legislative intelligence tool that helps organizations track policy throughout all 50 states and Congress. And that pivot really positioned us to launch into the last program that we went to was Techstars Anywhere. And that really solidified our product market fit. We were able to start to receive much larger resources. Since going through all those programs, we've raised over $2 million and really have developed a product that customers from nonprofits to corporations have been able to take their policy work to the next level. And I'll leave space if you want to add anything, Damola, to that experience.
No, nothing to add. Thank you for sharing all that, Shawntera. Michelle, can you also share the programs you've been a part of, why you felt like the timing was right for WeSparkle, and like just describe where your company was at the time?
So the first program that I did was called the Finnovation Fellowship. And when I entered that, it was really at the idea stage. I had been working as a chief of strategic initiatives at META, which is a nonprofit that helps minority entrepreneurs succeed. And so I went to this conference, heard about the Finnovation Fellowship, and thought it was the perfect opportunity for me to learn about starting a social enterprise. And so I did that program, which was a 9-month program. And it started in mid-September 2018. And then January of 2019, the beginning of the year, I started to think about Minnesota Cup. And I was familiar with that program because I had helped another business with their application a few years ago. But I was unsure about whether to apply for the Minnesota Cup because I just started the Finnovation Fellowship and was just starting to research and flesh out exactly what I wanted to build to solve the problem that I was focused on. And then I actually bumped into Shawntera and was talking with her, and she said, just go for it. It's a really great learning experience to be part of the Minnesota Cup, whether you end up winning any funding or not, because they connect you with mentors. And so I went for it, and we ended up winning the Impact Division this past October. And that sort of led to thanks, some other opportunities. We were part of Beta MN's fall 2019 cohort, and then now we are part of Lunar Startups. So those are all the programs that we've done, and they sort of have worked really well and helped us evolve all the way from an idea stage to now we'll be launching our product very soon to the general public. And so they really helped move us along through all the different stages of our business.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Michelle. It seems like for everybody, all the panelists, that there were like you were in a specific phase of your company for each program that you went through, right? For us at Civic Eagle, like the farm was like the pre-accelerator that we went through that really led to our pivot. Techstars was kind of like, going to college, right? It really like, shaped and molded the best practices that we follow to this date on like how to actually like grow a business. There was a question to you, Tyrre, from Sean around if you could share the differences between Techstars and Generator, right? If you could kind of just juxtapose, like, where were you when you went through Generator, and why was that the right program at that time? And where were you when you went through Techstars, and why was that the right program at that time?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think there are some very distinct differences. I think both of those programs I had failed to make the cut on a number of times. So I think one thing I will need to say is that the first time you apply, if you don't get in, keep applying, keep updating them, keep communicating exactly where the business is. Because I think I applied 3 times for Generator. And this was when I was literally at idea stage, didn't know where the company was going, kept updating, kept iterating, kept building the business. And then I got my first contract with USA Wrestling. And that was really kind of the entryway that actually got me into Generator. I think the biggest difference between Generator and Techstar was really Generator is 5 companies. They're dedicating all of their time and resources to those 5 companies. We were at the time, and Generator wasn't as big as they are now, but we had I was lucky as we were able to work directly with Troy and Troy Vossler and Joe Kurgis. These were the founders. We were working with them every day, and we were able to actually ask questions and spend like more time than you would normally get than if we were part of Techstars. Techstars is a bigger program. There's 10 other companies, and you kind of have to have a real business model. You have to have a really good idea around where you want the business to go, because that's how they're going to support you, foster, and question those assumptions. And so I think I had more dedicated time with Generator than I was with Techstars. I had to be a lot more self-sufficient with Techstars, but Techstars helped us operationalize the business. They helped us put together our weekly cadences, our monthly, our quarterly cadences. They helped us truly operationalize and build a real business. I think at the time when we were going through Generator, I didn't know how to run a business, and I didn't know exactly what goes into building a startup. It all sounds good until you start raising capital, until you start having to build a business. And I think when I was going through Techstars, they were very detailed into how we build a business and how we build culture. And you had to have some product market fit to get into Techstars. That wasn't the case with Generator. Generator, you just had to have some idea. You had to have a product of some sort. Maybe you didn't have any initial traction, but you could be a bit more earlier stage at the time. Now, that may have changed. It's been 4 years, but when I went through, you didn't have to have as much traction going through Generator as I did when I was with Techstars.
And thank you for sharing that, Tyrre. A little bit of my take on it as well is that there are programs that help you get from idea to product. There are programs that help you get from product to product market fit, or something earlier around product market fit. And there are programs that help you build a company. So figuring out where you are in terms of your company timeline and your company's like startup cycle will help you determine like which program is right for you. If you're not quite at product, going through if you're still in idea stage, like trying to apply to an accelerator that is really more geared toward like really building a company and that you've already found product, and the expectation that you've already found product market fit isn't going to be the best decision. So just keep those things in mind as well. Michelle, a question from the audience from Sierra. do programs always offer mentorship and coaching, and what does that look like?
So the majority of the programs I know about do offer mentorship and coaching. Even competition programs like the Minnesota Cup will match you up with mentors. They have a whole network, and then you can sort of pick the ones that you want to be your mentors. And it's really useful. The Finnovation Fellowship, I was matched up with Jackie Berglund, who owns Finnegan's Brewery, which is one of the oldest social enterprises around here. They've been around for 20 years. And so she has a lot of experience in that space. And I think they're probably one of the most valuable parts of the program, because you are matched up with mentors who are experts in different fields and have had that experience, which is just priceless in terms of being able to ask them questions, really practical, nuts and bolts type questions, logistical type problems that you don't often get maybe from watching a webinar, going through a class like that. So that honest feedback is really important that you can get from mentors. And I think it's probably one of the most valuable parts of all the programs that I've been a part of. Finnovation Fellowship, Minnesota Cup, Lunar Startups, and Beta have all offered mentorship as part of their programming.
Damola, if I can add something to that.
Yes.
Just from a standpoint of Civic Eagle's experience, that mentorship piece and just having people in your corner is key. As I think about what sparked as we've been talking and thinking about mentorship, one of our mentors is still to this day one of our advisors. And that was starting in 2015 from Minnesota Cup. And she has been invaluable, just an amazing asset to each stages of our growth. And so it's something that you should not take lightly when you're building those relationships. And how do you build those relationships from a place of authenticity, and you're willing to be pushed and pulled and pause along your journey is something that's very important. And I'll just end by just saying, don't think that you have to go to a program to get that type of relationship. That's something that you should be building outside of any program, is trusted people on your own personal and professional board of advisors, because it's helpful to.
Shawntera, I think you're cutting out right now. Well, I think you were close to wrapping up, so no worries there. You want to test your audio real quick just to make sure you're back, Shawntera? No, we still can't hear you. We'll check back. We can't hear you, Shawntera. We'll check back in with you in a couple minutes while you fix your audio.
Okay.
All right, now you're back. Cool. All right. If that's our worst, I'm gonna go
One
difficulty.
second.
I think we're doing good today. All right. So a question for everybody. And this is from Jessica Bird. Thanks, Jessica. How you doing? Good to hear from you. Can you talk more about which programs take equity versus which programs don't? And then also which programs offer prize money or a stipend versus the ones that don't. So basically, like which programs are taking equity versus which ones are giving cash still but aren't taking equity in return. And then what stages do you need to be in as you make those considerations around giving equity? So long question, but I think well-rounded. So let's start with Shawntera.
So I heard half of your question.
All right, let's start with Tyrre.
All right. Well, so I'll repeat the question for you, Shawntera, for sure.
Thank you.
So I think in terms of fundraising and going through the program, which programs actually took equity, and at what stage, would your company consider this? But also, capital that they're giving, are they taking equity for that capital, or are they just providing that as a part of the resource for the program? For both programs that I was a part of, both Generator and Techstars, they did take equity, and they also provided a convertible note that took a position in the business as well at a certain cap. What I didn't know, especially going into my second time around, is that it's very negotiable. And so I think my first time around, they have their terms on the marketing side, and you go, all right, I'm taking a 6% hit. The second time around, especially as your company hits certain milestones, you have some traction, you can negotiate. And there's specific valuations. Of course, there's hard lines to a bunch of stuff, but you can negotiate how much equity you give in your business, especially at a certain stage. When we were going through Techstars, we had over 100,000 athletes on our platform. Like we had product market fit in the sense that we were able to have organizations use our platform, and we had a lot of data at the time. We didn't have a lot of money. And so, but all of those things led into kind of what we were doing. We also had a lot of traction on the pivot that I was making on the insurance side of things. So I was thinking about where our business was at the time and the amount of investors we had interested. And I had already had soft committed a number of those, which I validated through my interviewing process. I wanted to make sure I was transparent as I could so that I can negotiate where our company was truly at in terms of where we were. But I put a lot of thought going into Techstars, whether I should do it or not, because the equity hit is a pretty significant hit, especially at the current time of where I have my company structured. We can talk about financing structures and cap tables at another call. But I think that was really important for me, and I didn't know that I could negotiate it. So I definitely, if you would leave with anything, especially as you're hitting milestones, you could generate some revenue, you can negotiate what those terms look like.
Thanks a lot, Tyre. I think the takeaway there is more traction, more leverage, right? You can start
100%.
really looking at setting your terms.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Tyrre. Shawntera, do you have anything to add to that?
I second everything that Tyrre said. I would just pull out a couple things. You know, I mentioned earlier understanding the startup game, and that's something related to financing. That if you don't understand finances, please have someone in your circle that understand finances, because you need to understand how much of your company do you want to give up. For us with Civic Eagle, having more than one co-founder, thinking about dilution, thinking about like how much of our company we want to own. If you don't have an understanding of the financial aspects of building a company, then you probably want to be very, very careful about going the venture or investment route, and think about starting with going the traditional banking route, because it is something that you have to understand, not only in that moment of, am I going after this program and they're going to take X% equity? You need to be thinking about the long-term impacts of, where do they stand? What's their rights and all those different things. Are you giving up board seats? Because there are instances where your lack of understanding, you can lose your company. And so I think understanding that negotiation power, but understanding the financial aspects of what it takes to make those investments. If I can't stress anything, it is so important. It is so important. It's not something that you pick up on the street, of understanding the cap table. Please take the time to be a student of the game before you take that route, because you can lose your company, hands down, period.
Yeah, definitely great points there, Shawntera. Michelle, can you speak to, the programs that you've went through and the ones that did or did not provide capital, and if that capital was, equity-based or like non-dilutive?
So the Finovation Fellowship does not take equity. It is supported through a grant from the Bush Foundation. And so they provide a living and healthcare stipend while you're in the 9-month incubator. And that was an amazing opportunity, because it allowed me to leave my full-time job and work on this business full-time and really take the time to understand the problem and come up with a good solution. So I would definitely recommend looking at programs that don't take equity, especially if you're at the very beginning, because you obviously don't have leverage. So, negotiating isn't really an option at that point. Minnesota Cup also does not take equity. It's prize money. And then Lunar Startups, which I'm a part of right now, has a small stipend associated with it. But it's the value that they bring is really around, providing a lot of logistical tools and that mentorship and networking. So I think especially for any of you social entrepreneurs or businesses that are looking more towards having a positive social impact, I think just reiterating what Shawntera says, when you're looking at these programs, they can be really valuable to get that source of capital. But you should be aware of not only the ownership that they're taking, but the influence that they have on the company because of that. My brother was part of Y Combinator 2 different times. He's sort of a serial entrepreneur, and I learned those lessons from him in terms of the type of investment that you take on and how that can influence the direction of your company, because there's certain pressures that are applied. So really take a look, especially if you're early on, and think about if there are programs that exist that you might be able to take advantage of that don't necessarily take ownership and don't have that sort of influence on your company at that stage.
Those were really strong points, Michelle. Thank you. There was a question from Johnny, and he said, for those who have gone through an accelerator, did you see many companies who went through it as well but didn't get any further funding? And I can, I'll make a quick comment about that. Going through an accelerator with the mindset that, with the expectation that you are guaranteed funding, like further funding afterwards, is a mistake. Most companies outside of Y Combinator, because basically if you go through YC, you raise whatever you want at your terms. They've kind of got things figured out there and how to do that. But outside of Y Combinator, every other program in the country that exists, the expecting that you're going to be able to go out and just fundraise just by the virtue of going through that program that's not the way that it works. You still have to build your business. You still have to grow. You still have to have the metrics. That's what investors are still looking for. An accelerator is there to help you be able to drive towards those metrics a little bit faster, right? Build your company in a little bit of a better and stronger way, so you have a better shot of growing in the way that investors are expecting you to grow, and based off of like the market that you're serving and where you are as a company. So they're not there to be able to just say, here, like, because you went through this program, now you got the stamp of approval from Techstars. Now it's super easy for you to go out and raise money. That's just not the way that it works. When Civic Eagle, when we were able to go out and raise after going through Techstars, it was primarily, there was rarely a conversation. I don't think there was ever one conversation about the fact that we went through Techstars. It was just solely based off of our metrics and solely based off of the vision and the team, the things that you normally would expect going out and raising capital. So I'll leave it up to the panel. Do any other panelists want to comment on if they saw any other companies go through their program that didn't get funding, or maybe some of the things that I touched on what to expect from finishing a program and then going out and trying to raise venture capital, if that's the pathway you decide?
I can speak a little bit to that. I think everything that you just said is 100% correct. No expectations at all. I think the idea that going through that program is really time intensive. I think having a team is really important, because if the main objective is to go and fundraise, you're not going to be growing the business at all at that point. If you're fundraising is a full-time job. Like, I have a spreadsheet that coming out of Techstars, I had a spreadsheet of 1,500 investors, stages of where they invest. Like, it was a sales sheet. I went prospecting, and I was working with these organizations to try to figure out how can we get these organizations to invest in us. It was a full-time job. And so I think a lot of organizations, when they go through these accelerator programs, they're thinking that they're just going to come. You literally have created more work for you to do. Post the program, you have 90 to 120 day window to make it happen. And you've already given up 6 months through the program, getting through the program. So I think just before you start the program, understand the time commitment and where you're going to spend that time and how you're going to allocate it. What is the opportunity to cost of going through the program? I think that's one of the biggest things that I think has to be connected. What did I get for lunch? Chick-fil-A.
We just saw, it's over there on the right.
Tyrre,
Okay, there we go. All right, thanks a lot for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that, Tyrre. And I'll pose this question, a more general question, to Shawntera and to Michelle. We'll start with Michelle on this one. Just in general, what are the biggest pieces of advice that you would give to folks starting out in their businesses that are considering applying to these programs? Just like, what are the 1 or 2 kind of big picture pieces of advice that you would give to audience members, again, that are just starting out in their businesses?
Yeah, I think that having a really clear idea of your problem and your target customer is really the most important thing, because as we've been talking about, as you go through these accelerator programs, you do sometimes pivot a little bit, or your solution might change, or you might evolve your business model. But something that is common is really understanding what the problem is and who you're trying to serve. Um, I would say that's one of the biggest pieces of advice. Even with, I teach middle school and high school students who are now applying for the youth division, the Minnesota Cup. And I think they're worried that, they're not as far along as maybe other businesses might be. But, they've accomplished a lot over the past few months. And I think it's really just understanding their customer and what the problem that they're trying to solve. And then their actual product or service might evolve over time. And trying to find a program that's the right fit. So we've all been part of different programs, and really evaluating where you are, whether your idea, whether you're further along, you have some customers and some revenue. But also just there are different accelerator programs that focus on different areas. So, the Finovation Fellowship is really focused on social enterprise. There's some that are focused on tech, on health, all different types. And you really want to find one that's a good fit, because especially if they're going to take equity, you want to make sure that the mentors and the networks that they're providing are of value to, and even worth even more than that equity. So making sure that it's one that is a good fit for your company at that time.
Thank you, Michelle. Shawntera, what about you? Is there one or two kind of big picture pieces of information or advice, that you would say folks on the call that are just starting out in their businesses need to consider when applying for these programs?
Kind of along the same lines. I think first, be honest about where you are with your company. Know the stage that you're in. If you're still in idea stage, if the program is really focused on, taking your product or service to the next level, maybe it's not for you. So being very honest about where you are, I think that's important. I think the other thing, and this is a two-way street, is just being committed to going all in with that program. One, for yourself to be able to push your business to where it needs to go. But the other thing is, as you think about many of these programs, Tyrre mentioned in terms of Techstars and our experience too with Techstars, there's 10 or 11 companies. Not everybody gets in. And if you're not committed and you're not going to go all in, you are probably in the space of another company that can be saving the world, saving the community, taking their family to a place of prosperity. And so that commitment is, as an individual, but also as a true business owner, is so important, because many of these programs aren't dime a dozen. And so I just really would strongly recommend that people take that time to reflect on their commitment to giving their all, and that's all your resource, your time, your talent, and just the true commitment to see the program through. And that will be tested even once you get in the middle of it. So that would be the two pieces of advice that I would give.
Yeah, and I want to double down on what Shawntera said, and then add a little, my advice as well. So to double down first, when we go through programs at Civic Eagle, we look at it as a competition. We want to outperform our peers going through that program. When we went through the farm, the goal was to outperform our peers. We go through Techstars, the goal was to outperform our peers, not in like a combative way, but really in like kind of in the spirit of competition, and understanding that in order for you to succeed, you really gotta be in that top 1% of startup companies, because that's how difficult it is for companies to really come through the fire and actually make it and succeed in the startup game. So to Shawntera's point, it's not just being committed and saying that I'm going to be present in this program, because a lot of times, and we'll talk about, I'll ask this question next, a lot of times it really is difficult for folks to be able to run their business while going through the program. You've got to figure out a way to balance those two things out, because the goal, is that if you go through something, if you're doing something, is to excel. I'm sure everybody on this call that you're used to working really hard. You wouldn't, be interested in starting a business, or I've already started a business, if you were, if you were shy of hard work. So when you go through the program, everybody is there trying to work hard. So it's like, how can you stick out? How can you stand out? How can you outperform what your peers are doing? And if you're able to outperform in a program that's already selective, then you're really setting yourself up to succeed, because now you're, amongst the elite of the elite, right? You're really getting there. So, my thing for my team is always to be the best, and be present in the programs that we're in at all times. And then another piece of advice that I just want to share really quickly is, if you are a co-founder that's on this call and you're starting your company, and especially if you're the CEO, you've got to be a really strong storyteller, not just orally, but also in written form, right? All of these programs are requiring you to, fill out an online application, and then most likely some sort of video interview, a video call or phone call, something like that. And when it comes to fundraising, like really anything on the company, selling your product, selling your solution, CEO is not just chief executive officers, chief evangelist, right? Like your goal, your job, your mission is to be the best storyteller for your company as you possibly can. And if that's not a skill set that you have kind of innately, it's something that you really need to work on building and developing. And how am I receiving feedback from people when I'm telling them what we're building, our story, like my narrative, my personal narrative? How am I adjusting that, and then being able to tweak it and figure out what kind of motivates and inspires people when I tell that story? So, my advice is that as you apply to these programs, really focus not just on like, hey, I just want to share all this great idea and think, like it's a story, it's a narrative, both verbally, both orally, as well as in written form. So really work on that skill set. So okay, yeah, definitely. And just a quick note, the Minnesota Cup applications are open right now, but they're closing Friday at midnight. So for folks who are earlier in stage, right, like you're in idea stage, maybe like early MVP, and want to do a program that doesn't take equity, please apply. Like Shawntera mentioned, like Michelle mentioned, both of our companies went through the Minnesota Cup. We both won the social division at different times, obviously. And it was non-dilutive money. It was basically 30. What I say is that if it's non-dilutive, meaning nobody's taking equity, it's free cash, right? And you can't beat free cash. So it was $30,000 for winning the division. I believe it's a little bit more now. And then also a larger cash prize if you win the overall Minnesota Cup. But not just, the cash incentive and the non-dilutive cash incentive, but also the mentorship that we received out of it, the guidance and support. One of our mentors back from 2015 when we went through the Minnesota Cup is on our board of advisors to this day. Mary Pat Blake, she's been amazing. I'm sure Michelle probably has a similar story. So definitely want to encourage everybody, if you are looking for kind of that, kind of earlier stage programming, especially because it's non-dilutive, please apply to the Minnesota Cup. Take advantage of a great homegrown program. Michelle, do you have anything to add to kind of the Minnesota Cup and your experience with it?
Yeah, I definitely encourage people, because I felt that same way when I was applying, that, oh, we're too early stage. You should go ahead and apply. It's a good learning experience, and it forces you to answer questions that you need to answer for your business anyway. So you might as well do it. It holds you accountable and keeps you on a timeline.
Thanks, Michelle. Tyrre, what is the number one thing you wish you knew when you started when you started Generator?
That I didn't have to take the note. So I think a lot of the when it comes to kind of equity, and you may have a structure, and I'll give this is an example. I'm not sure if Generator is still structured this way or was structured this way when we were going through. But say they said that we're going to do 120K investment. 20K of that actually is the 6% that they'll take, or the 7 or whatever percent. The 100K is optional. That's a note that you can choose to take or not take. I didn't know that. And I think going through that, and I'm not saying, you have these conversations and you go, well, I didn't have to take that, or I could have taken that, and just understanding exactly what the overall terms were, I think were huge. And then luckily through us going through Generator, we raised our fund. We were raising $1 million. 3 weeks into the program, we had closed our financing. And so that was a bit unique in the program. We're excited about that, because at demo day, I was able to announce that we had closed our financing and we were done. I think I didn't utilize my mentors as well as I should have. I had got connected with some really great individuals, and then after the program, our relationship, I didn't continue to foster that relationship. And so that was one of the things that I think I wish I could go back. Going through Techstars, Dave DuPont was was the CEO of TeamSnap, was our mentor. He still is a mentor of mine today, and we have a partnership with TeamSnap. So I learned that lesson going through Generator, but that's what I would do differently for sure.
Well, thanks, Harry. That makes a lot of sense. A question to Shawntera. What was one of the biggest mistakes that we made, Civic Eagle made, when we applied to a specific program, so any program, but then also while we were in the program? What is one of the biggest mistakes that we made? And be careful here.
I'll take it from this perspective, because you mentioned earlier that the investment for a lot of these programs is time. Civic Eagle from day one has been a remote distributed team. And what that means is that we all live in different states, and trying to converge on a program in one state. I was working a full-time job. And knowing that I couldn't contribute even 10% of what was needed for the program, that put a lot on the other two co-founders. But I don't think that we really took into full consideration the magnitude of the time of being distributed and having to fly in or fly out or tag team and tag out. I mean, we was and will continue to be blessed because we have more than one lead on our team. But I think the time, and that's something that I just really want to stress, that when you go through these programs, it's time away from fill in the blank. Family, friends, building the business, making sales calls, thinking about the product. If you are not the technical founder, staying in touch with building things like that. And so I think we underestimated in some respects time. So I think that was huge. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think being conscious of the commitment that you're making, and then we made the commitment, didn't realize the amount of time, and then had to kind of readjust and recalibrate and saying, okay, we need to give more of ourselves to this, and we did not anticipate that going in. But no matter what, we still made the decision to say, we're going to put in the time that it takes to actually make this thing work for us. Michelle, a question for you. Sorry, I lost it. What are the biggest misconceptions of some of the programs that you went to that don't take equity? So I think you said Finovation doesn't take equity, Lunar Startups. What is the biggest misconception of the programs that provide some money but don't take equity?
I think sometimes people think that they're maybe not as valuable. I think that might be a misconception that people have, just because I think, at least in the tech space, which I've been in, there's really big accelerator programs that you hear about, like Techstars, and they do take equity. And so I think sometimes people think that these programs that don't necessarily take equity maybe aren't providing as much value, but I would definitely say that's a huge misconception. The value that I got from the Finovation Fellowship and, from Lunar Startups now is tremendous, because for Lunar Startups, for example, they provide legal services, which are really helpful, especially as you're starting out, like Tyrre mentioned, helping you figure out your cap table and whether you should be accepting a convertible note and what does that actually mean. Those types of programs and mentorship is huge and really invaluable. And I think that a lot of these programs, even really small ones, I mean, we're really fortunate to live in Minnesota, which has a lot of great business support organizations, programs, initiatives, Launch Minnesota. There's so much out there that even ones that are really small, especially if you're at the idea stage, where they aren't taking equity, they're just going to help you think through you know, your business plan, I would take advantage of those because you can learn a lot from them. If nothing else, you can get perspectives from other people on your product, which I think is really valuable. But you also do want to weigh the time thing. Like Shawntera mentioned, you know, some of these programs take more time than others, and realizing, you know, how much time you can put into a program is really important. But I wouldn't discount any programs that aren't taking equity because a lot of them are providing a lot of value.
Definitely agree with that. So we've got 10 minutes left, time for 2 questions, and both of these questions are going to be for all 3 panelists. And I ask that you keep your answers to about 90 seconds or less. So the first question, again, for all panelists, what are accelerators looking for in terms of evaluating company applications? So that initial written application. And let's define a little bit more. What are the 3 things that accelerators are looking for as they're evaluating that application? And thanks for the question, Akshay. Let's start with Tyrre.
Still thinking of the third, but I know team and problem, I think, is huge. Oh, and I think expertise. So I think the team, they're really looking to see, can you get it done? Do you have the passion for it? And I think really looking at how big the problem is in the market. I think those are really kind of the foundation for starting any business, but they're going to be heavily weighted on your team and your ability to scale. I think I got knocked a lot because I'm a single founder. Having a co-founder is really important to a lot of accelerator programs.
Cool, thanks, Tyrre. Shawntera, what about you?
I would strongly agree. Having a strong team that has understanding, and even if it's not direct experience, but even tangential experience into the area that you're looking to solve, having a clear idea, you know that problem and know that market. And then I think the last thing I'll just say is back to commitment to build a strong business and that you're going to stick with it. Even through the pivots and the pitfalls. And so I think those are the things that even in the first meeting that many of the programs, but also angels and other investors can see right through those things very quickly.
Thanks, Shawntera. And Michelle?
I would agree. The team or the person, even if you're a single founder, you know, why are you tackling this issue? And do you have the grit to really go through the ups and downs of figuring it out? And then, you know, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Do you understand the problem really well? And do you understand who you're serving, your target customer, really well? I think those are all things that they look for. And just, you know, how innovative is your product or service? Is it something that is unique and that you're bringing something new of value to the community? So taking a look at that and seeing kind of the potential around that.
Cool, thanks, Michelle. So we're gonna try to squeeze one more question in, and we'll actually do this one a little bit different. I'm gonna ask all panelists to, in the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner, as those, you know, the thoughts come to your mind, like share the programs that you think folks should take a look at and possibly apply to. That have or have not been mentioned, just so that there's a running list. I'm hoping folks have been taking notes, but just in case, if you do have some programs that you think folks should take a look at, just in the bottom right-hand corner, panelists, start typing those in so folks can go back and refer to them. Cool? All right. Now moving on to our very last question, and I'll go Shawntera, then Michelle, then Tyrre, so you guys know the order as you're typing in those programs in the bottom right-hand corner. So Shawntera, in closing, what programs actually, this is the question that we're addressing right now, but in closing, like, is there anything that you want to share or plug with the community, like for Civic Eagle or for yourself?
I'll do all of the above. I'll start in terms of programs. Hands down, look at Minnesota Cup. Look at also the Lunar Startups and a number of the other programs that were mentioned. If you're at that stage, think about Techstars. Also, you know, if you have a business that the industry is not strong here and that There is a number of other states that have accelerators. Know that you can compete and look outside of the state boundaries for other programs. So I encourage you to do that. A couple things I also encourage you to do is know the ecosystem. You know, connect to organizations like the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, Greater MSP, Forge North, Tequity, Twin Cities Innovation Alliance, a number of those organizations that are working in the space, Gravity, that, you know, are really working to make sure that people have access to these other resources. With Civic Eagle, if you have an organization that navigates in the public policy space, we would love to have you on our legislative intelligence platform. If you're connected to an organization that's tracking policy at the state level in Congress, we actually do have a offer for organizations to be able to get on our platform free until the end of the month or so. And so I offer you that. The last thing I'll just say in terms of just themes that I heard throughout this conversation, I think the foundation is just be committed to yourself and your business and making sure that you give it your all, because building a business is not easy. When you think about these programs, yes, it's about the capital, but understand the capital. And yes, it's about the content. You know, understand how to build a business. And then lastly is about the community. Like, you're coming in there, you may be with a cohort, you may be with businesses that you never would have come across. Build those relationships, because you never know, they may be your customer, your clients, or just your friends in business. And so I just encourage you to be thoughtful about when you say yes to joining the program, that you think about what you're going to get out on the other end.
Thanks, Shawntera. Completely forgot. Was it Tyrre then Michelle? Michelle and then Tyrre.
How are you?
Michelle could go. Michelle could go, then I'll go.
All right, Michelle, can you go? Hey, first time panelist host, you know, long time panelist participant. So like, bear with me. All right, Michelle, go ahead.
So in addition to the Finnovation Fellowship, the Finnovation Lab has a lot of other programs too, like a 2-day seed spot camp, this launch SKU that they're doing as well. So just looking for other programming like that. Impact Hub as well for social entrepreneurs has a lot of kind of programming, and then other business support organizations like the U.S. Small Business Administration, SCORE, Women Venture, Neighborhood Development Center, NEON, MEDA. They all have different programs depending on what stage you're at and what industry you're in. So just take a look at their websites or follow them on social media, and you can find out a lot of the programs that they're putting on.
Cool, thanks, Michelle. And is there anything that you want to share with the community for support, or like that you want to plug?
Yeah, so I would just say, as you're doing these programs, to remember to give back as well. You know, you are being part of these programs to get mentorship, but whenever possible, you know, try and reach back and also mentor others. You're never too young to start mentoring. You know, I teach middle school and high school students, and, you know, we have other high school students who come in and mentor them. So if you have time coming and speaking, and then you can practice your pitch, and it's pretty easy because you're speaking to young people. So as you go through these programs, offer help to others in your cohort, but also reach out to other programs and see if there are ways that you can assist them.
Thank you, Michelle. And Tyrre, anything you want to plug or share?
Programs that I would probably add that haven't already been mentioned, you all did a great job making it hard for me. Generator does have their G-Beta program. So they have a program that, all right, say you're not quite a product market fit, you're still at kind of idea and kind of your MVP stage. G-Beta is a great program, and a lot of those organizations have become Generator programs, have gone to their accelerator. They're not taking any equity as a part of that. And Generator now has a number of other kind of, I'd say, themes of programs in music, art. It's insane kind of what they've done and the platform they have, but they're local here in Minneapolis as well. I think kind of parting thoughts, I think lead with passion. I think that's one thing that's got me to where I'm at. I'm 100% okay with saying I don't know something. I make a lot of mistakes. I try to learn quick from my mistakes, and I think going through those programs have helped me have a safe space where I can communicate what I don't know. And so I think being able to have a space that you feel comfortable where you can go and you don't feel like you have to know everything, those are great environments. And I think I try to find good people and environments where you can do that as often as you can. You're going to learn a lot. So yeah, stay humble, stay hungry.
All right, thank you, Tyrre, Players Health, Shawntera, Civic Eagle, Michelle, We Sparkle. Thanks for participating today. All of our guests that attended, thank you all for participating, asking great questions. I saw every question in there was good, so thank you for asking good questions. And then obviously a shout out to Minnestar, to Maria, thanks for putting this on. And if anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns, you know who to reach out to at Minnestar. So have a great rest of your afternoon, y'all. And a pleasure being a part of this conversation.
All right, you guys have a good one.
Thank you.